The orbital lights of Ivorus Prime cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Galactic Assembly Hall, glinting off banners from 100 worlds. The great chamber murmured with nervous energy, a tapestry of languages woven into tension. At its center stood the representative of a relatively new member world, Kale Rowe, Earth's appointed ambassador, clad in a dark uniform devoid of medals or insignia. He stood with the stillness of stone, hands clasped behind his back, eyes calmly surveying the arena before him. He did not speak. He waited. A fluttering of wings announced the presence of Senator Vurex of the Ilta Combine, whose translucent membrane fluttered with agitation. Ambassador Rowe, the senator began, voice sharp and metallic. This is the third unprovoked disappearance of a fleet near human-adjacent space in as many cycles. And again, you bring no explanation. Kill did not flinch. Because I have none to give. A murmur rolled through the amphitheater, skepticism, derision, disbelief. You expect us to believe, hissed the crystalline diplomat of the Kroll system, that 17 Cthar warships, 17, were simply lost? With no engagement logs, no distress calls, not even radiation signatures. Kale tilted his head slightly. The Cthar entered a contested zone without notifying the assembly. They ignored 5 hails from our early warning satellites. We sent a diplomatic vessel to establish contact. What we found was silence. You found debris, spat the Cerity Hive representative, her voice a wet chitter. No black boxes, no trace of escape pods, not a single life form. An entire fleet, dissected. Kale allowed a moment of quiet to settle, choosing his words carefully. Humanity does not engage in aggression. We do not escalate. We respond. If we are not given the courtesy of peaceful interaction, we act to preserve our people. Another voice broke in, colder, deliberate. What exactly does Earth consider preservation, Ambassador? Kale turned toward the speaker. High Chancellor Nezrath of the Vorka Dominion, a race of towering, stone-skinned beings known for their brutal conquests and archaic honor codes. Kale met the Chancellor's gaze without flinching. We consider it the boundary between civilization and extinction. A sudden hush overtook the chamber. It was not the response expected from a representative of a species that had only just clawed its way into relevance. For a century, Earth had offered technology, trade, and diplomacy, but had never spoken with this quiet edge. Not until now. From a private gallery above the council chamber, unseen by most, Commander Alara Voss watched the exchange. Her presence was not announced. Her credentials were not recorded. She wore no insignia and carried no rank in public. But her orders had not come from any known department of the Accord. She was here as a shadow, watching, measuring. Alara's eyes never left Kale. They had fought side by side once, before he became a diplomat and she became a ghost. Back when the galaxy still believed humanity needed allies to survive. Before Earth realized it had been pretending. A soft ping in her earpiece broke her concentration. Sigma 9 probe returned. Debris confirmed. Pattern matches Cthar thermonuclear hull composition. No signs of human weapon signatures. She nodded, subvocalizing her reply. Continue cleanup protocol. No public trace. Below, Kale had resumed silence. The assembly chattered among themselves like birds in a storm, accusations piling atop theories, but no one moved toward a resolution. They could not. Earth had learned diplomacy from the masters of manipulation, then mastered it in kind. And now, when cornered, it wore its oldest weapon, ambiguity. In a corner of the assembly hall, Arundel of the Vuron Analysis Collective recorded every nuance of Kale's expression. Her mind, attuned to biometric and emotional subtleties, parsed his micro-movements. His pulse rate was low, breathing even, his gaze unbroken. What disturbed her most was not what she saw, but what she didn't. There was no fear, no bluster, no attempt to plead or evade. Only a quiet stillness, like the calm eye of a hurricane. Later that cycle, Kale Rowe walked the private garden paths of the Earth Embassy, flanked by bodyguards who never spoke. Artificial birds sang in the branches of simulated pines. There was serenity here, designed, curated, utterly unlike the chaos he'd faced hours before. Alara was waiting by the fountain. You were subtle, she said without greeting. Kale sat beside her, resting his hands on his knees. They forced our hand. Again, Alara's jaw tightened. The Cthar hit Sigma-9 with ground troops and orbital cannons. Earth warned them. The Assembly refused to acknowledge it. You call that force? They didn't believe the warning. Kale looked at her, his voice heavy. Now they're wondering if we ever meant for them to. Alara's smile was brief and bitter. Good. He studied her profile in the fading garden light. You're still angry. I never stopped, she replied. We built hospitals, shared terraforming tech, extended offers of mutual defense. And they laughed, saw us as quaint, emotional, inefficient. They see us now. Not yet, she said. They're suspicious, afraid, but not aware. Not fully. Kale was silent for a moment, then asked, and when they are? Alara turned to him then, her expression unreadable. Then we stopped pretending. Before he could answer, his personal terminal blinked. An encrypted message from Earth Command. He scanned the content quickly, brief, chilling. Unconfirmed assault on Frontier Post Hera 3. No survivors. Automated distress signal intercepted. Local assembly patrol logged in proximity. No intervention. Valkyrie units en route. Disavowals in process. Kale stood slowly, posture tightening like a wire. They're still testing us, he said. No. Alara murmured, standing beside him. They're daring us. Above them, stars winked through the artificial sky. Quiet. Innocent. Watching. Kale turned toward the embassy's secure channel. There was no need for speeches now. No declarations. Just a single command. Alara, he said softly. Activate threshold protocol. She gave a sharp nod and vanished into the shadows. Earth had been patient, restrained, civil. Now it would teach the galaxy what it had forgotten. Predators do not ask permission to hunt. The Galactic Assembly convened in the spire city of Ivorous Prime, where silver towers pierced the clouds like blades. Delegates from across the stars filled the central amphitheater, an elegant web of platforms suspended in low gravity, designed for graceful discourse. The mood was tense, the air thick with hushed murmurs and shifting glances. At the center, hovering alone on his platform, stood Ambassador Kale Rowe of Earth. He was unarmed, clothed in the understated navy blue formal wear of Earth's diplomatic corps, and wore the calm expression of a man used to listening more than speaking. But beneath the serenity in his eyes, something dangerous coiled, just out of sight. The silence around him was not one of respect, but unease. 2 weeks had passed since the Cthar incident on Sigma-9, and still no answers came. Only questions, and a spreading fear. Ambassador Rowe rasped Senator Chixel of the Serity Hive, his 6 mandibles twitching with agitation. Your silence grows more offensive by the day. We demand a full accounting. What became of the Cthar fleet? Kale inclined his head politely. As I've stated, the United Earth Accord has no official engagement records regarding the Cthar fleet beyond their attack on Sigma-9. We dispatched a recovery and response team, but found only debris. No bodies, interjected Rello Thurn of the Thalaxi conglomerate, a silicon-skinned being who radiated heat with every word. No survivors. Not even fragments large enough to analyze. A fleet that size doesn't simply vanish. Kale spread his hands in a gesture of contrition. Perhaps the Cthar met with an unforeseen hazard. There are still rogue AI swarms in that quadrant. Or spatial anomalies. We remain open to cooperative investigation. The assembly erupted in frustrated hisses, hums, and discordant tones. Even the normally aloof Vorka observers whispered among themselves. Only the Kalari delegation remained silent, their eyeless faces unreadable. In the far shadows of the amphitheater, a lone analyst observed from behind the security veil. She was not a diplomat, nor a politician, just an intelligence officer from the Galactic Surveillance Bureau. Arendelle of the Vuron species, her mind processed data at speeds unimaginable to most. And what she saw in Kale Rowe chilled her. He blinked just a fraction slower than necessary. He breathed with calculated rhythm. His calm was not patience. It was control, leashed fury. Later that same cycle, Arendelle accessed the restricted files compiled by her division. She scrolled through intercepted transmissions, fragmented footage, and telemetry data. One recovered image stood out, a still frame taken from deep space drone feed. It showed a human dropship in low orbit above Sigma-9. Around it, ships of Cthar design floated, shattered, dismembered like insects torn apart by careful fingers. The human vessel remained untouched. No heat signatures. No plasma scoring. Just silence. She expanded the file further. In one image, she saw the face of a woman, pale with blood streaked across her cheek, eyes glowing faintly red under infrared filter. The database tagged her as Commander Ilera Voss. She should not have been there. Her record showed reassignment to a medical post after the war. Arundel traced a series of dark clearances and off-record deployments leading back 5 years. Someone had buried Voss's name under layers of quiet reassignments and provisional orders. She wasn't retired. She was redeployed. To what? Arundel compiled her findings into a confidential report, flagged it to be reviewed by the Assembly's High Command, and coded it with urgency markers. But deep in her mind, she already knew the truth wouldn't reach them in time. Meanwhile, across the outer rim of the known galaxy, something terrible stirred. The Tathar war clan, emboldened by the Kthar's silence, launched coordinated raids on 3 human frontier posts. Each colony transmitted distress signals. Earth sent no reply. The Accord remained officially silent. No ambassadors spoke. No envoys pleaded. 3 days later, the Tathar clan was gone. Entire fleets incinerated. Orbital platforms reduced to slag. Planetary assault ships split open like fruit. Again, there were no survivors. No data trails. No audio recordings, except one. It lasted 7 seconds. Static. Then a human voice, female, distorted by interference, but unmistakably clear in intent. Warning ignored. Retaliation authorized. No quarter. The Assembly spiraled into panic. The Thalaxi proposed sanctions. The Serity demanded an emergency vote. But none dared to send forces toward Earth. They didn't know what they would be fighting, or if they'd survive long enough to call it war. Back in Ivorus Prime, Kale Rowe attended a closed-door session with the Assembly's Security Directorate. They asked the questions gently this time. "We need to understand what's happening," said Director Niven, a smooth-tongued Letherian who once called Earth a quaint little rock with good manners. "We welcomed humanity in peace. We offered you partnership. And now..." Kale sipped from a glass of clear liquid and set it down deliberately. "I was born during the Siberian food riots," he said, voice calm. "My father fought in the orbital siege. My mother taught crisis negotiation to officers preparing for colony collapses. Do you know what Earth's greatest resource is, Director?" Niven blinked. "Diplomacy." Kale smiled faintly. "Restraint." He stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and looked each delegate in the eye. "Earth has spent a century proving that we are capable of peaceful coexistence. We gave you art, culture, medicine, energy. We played by your rules. We asked for help when we were attacked. You responded with indifference. Those incidents," Niven began. "We did not escalate," Kale continued. "We adapted. And now you realize what we were adapting from." Niven leaned back, visibly rattled. "Then, what happens next?" Kale walked to the chamber's edge and paused. His voice softened, but carried a sharpness that left no room for misinterpretation. "That depends entirely on how long it takes the rest of the galaxy to remember that the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't need to bare its teeth." As he stepped out into the corridor, the Security Directorate sat in stunned silence. In her private chamber, Arundel watched the recording a second time, then a third. She isolated Kale's voice, ran tone analysis, micro-expression tracking, and emotion vectoring. The results disturbed her more than anything else. There was no anger, no bloodlust, only clarity. She sat for a long time before recording her final note. "The humans are not becoming something terrible," she whispered. "They've always been that way. We just didn't see it. Or perhaps we didn't want to." And somewhere, in the uncharted dark between stars, the lights of another alien fleet went dark. Commander Ilera Voss stood in the observation deck of the Argus Ascendant, Earth's most advanced stealth cruiser, her gaze fixed on the ghost-light horizon of the galactic rim. The stars were different here, colder, less forgiving. Behind her, a soft chime sounded, and Kale Rowe stepped into the room. He didn't speak at first. He just stood beside her, hands clasped loosely behind his back. "They're going to make a move," he said quietly. "The Assembly has approved an investigatory fleet. They'll come looking for answers." "They won't find what they want," Ilera replied. Her voice was low, but laced with steel. "And they won't be prepared for what they do find." Kale turned to look at her, studying the faint scars that traced her cheek. They hadn't healed cleanly, though Earth had the technology. She'd chosen to keep them. Reminders, she'd once said, of a truth the rest of the galaxy refused to acknowledge. They still don't understand, Kale said. After everything. The Cthar, the Tathar, the probes that never returned. They think we're retaliating. Alera's lips twisted in a wry, bitter smile. We're not retaliating. We're reminding them. Across the command deck, Admiral Kaido's voice crackled over the intercom. Commander Voss, Ambassador Rowe, please report to the war room. Situation developing on Vector 7C. They arrived moments later. A holographic display dominated the center of the chamber, green lines mapping a fleet's trajectory as it entered human-monitored space. Multiple signatures. 17 warships bearing the insignia of the Vorka Dominion. Kale's brows furrowed. The Vorka, he said, puzzled. They haven't engaged in a military action in over 200 years. They were watching, Alera said. They've always been watching. And now they want to see it for themselves. Kaido folded his arms. Scouting mission. Or provocation. Either way, they're daring us to respond. Good, Alera said. We will. She tapped the command console, overlaying Earth's hidden defense grid onto the map. It spanned sectors, silent, unmoving constructs floating in the void, seemingly lifeless until triggered. Activate Protocol Salus. Prepare the Valkyrie unit for deployment. Kaido hesitated. Full deployment? Yes, she interrupted. We warned them. Twice. This is the third breach. No more diplomatic theater. Kale gave a small nod, approving the command without reservation. If they come for the Predator, let them see its teeth. As the orders disseminated through the ship, Kale walked alongside Alera to the Valkyrie staging bay. Dozens of elite operatives stood at attention, armor glinting, eyes burning with purpose. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were specialists, engineered, trained, and honed for asymmetric warfare. Humanity's quiet answer to the galaxy's arrogance. Among them was Lieutenant Silas Dorn, his voice a gravel whisper as he greeted them. Permission to engage? Alera studied him. Young, but tempered by fire. He'd survived operations that no one talked about. She saw in him what others refused to see in her, clarity born of suffering. Granted, she said. Leave none behind. As the Valkyrie units launched, Kale returned to the diplomatic channels, sending a single message to the assembly. Unidentified Vorkov fleet has violated sovereign human space. Earth recognizes this as an act of aggression. Defensive measures engaged. For your records. He made no threats. He offered no ultimatums. The Vorkov fleet never made it past the asteroid belt. On Ivorus Prime, chaos ignited. Assembly envoys shouted accusations, demanded evidence, cried foul. But Earth responded only with data logs, time-stamped and clean. The Vorka had entered restricted territory. Earth defended itself. No further comment. Arendelle watched it unfold from her surveillance station. She knew now that none of it was coincidence. Every move calculated. Every silence louder than any declaration. The humans weren't reacting. They were setting the tempo of a symphony no one else had ever learned to hear. She traced back the timeline again, piece by piece. The Cthar siege on Sigma 9 hadn't been an isolated attack. It had been bait. A test. A line in the sand drawn so faintly the rest of the galaxy hadn't even seen it, until it was too late. She replayed the last message from Commander Voss to Earth's Strategic Command, recovered from a covert array hidden on a derelict moon. They still think diplomacy is our shield, Voss had said. It's our camouflage. The next day, a summit was held in secret among the Assembly's most powerful members. They spoke not of retaliation, but of preservation. We cannot fight them, said Director Niven flatly. Not as we are. We've spent centuries mastering governance, expansion, knowledge. They spent theirs mastering survival. Are you suggesting we surrender? Asked a Serity envoy, incredulous. No, Niven said. I'm suggesting we adapt. Or we become extinct. Silence followed. Far beyond, aboard the Argus Ascendant, Alera Voss stood alone once more, watching the stars. This time, she didn't look out. She looked in, at Earth's growing web of influence, at the unraveling order of a galaxy long ruled by false peace. Kale joined her again. It's begun, he said. Yes, she replied. Now they see us. His voice was quiet. Are you ready for what comes next? Alera's smile was cold. I've always been ready. They just never believed we would be. Above them, the stars remained unchanged. But across the galaxy, everything else was shifting. And in the silence that followed, the Predator removed its mask.